I want to talk about attachment theory today. Not so much the basics, I will breeze through these, but how you can use the insights that it generates for you personally to connect more consciously, not just to your romantic partner, but also to your friends, to your work, and to yourself. So, in a nutshell, what is attachment theory? You may have heard about it loads, it's been on the internet a ton. This was a theory by Bowlby that was developed a couple of decades ago that basically puts forward this idea that our childhood experiences really shape how we're interacting with other people, with the world as we are growing up, as we're adults, and that the relationship we have to our primary caregiver or caregivers shape our behavior for later relationships with others, especially the relationship that we want to maintain with one person if you are into monogamy. So any sort of intimate relationship that we want to have for a long time and that we want to have as a stable form of social support in our lives tends to be something that we can already learn about looking at the childhood of a person, because what we learn there we often then apply subconsciously. We're very rarely aware of it. And there are different types. So initially there were 3 types, there's now 4 types. With types, we always want to be a little bit cautious because most likely there's more factors at play and it's not that easy. So instead of thinking like, which type am I, it is a bit more helpful to look at how high do I score on the scale of each type. And that together brings you more closely to a more nuanced understanding of how you attach to other people. There's tests online you can do. Some are atrocious, some are actually really good. And I also just want to share a word of caution. I'm happy to send you a link if you want to do one of those tests. And it is also a different experience to do that if you are not able to discuss it with somebody. So I remember doing one of those a couple of years ago, and I was very fortunate that I could discuss it with people. But it was surprising because sometimes we have a pretty good understanding of our attachment already. I am a psychologist, I study connection. I've done my PhD in connection. I've done a lot of coaching work about connection. I've done a lot of self-development myself. And I was still initially surprised by what I found. So be a little bit mindful and advocate for your own needs. If you want to take one, who are you going to talk about it afterwards? And make that a person who knows a little bit about that, right? Because you don't want to talk yourself into a frenzy with another friend who's like similarly shocked by what you might find out. But essentially, we have a split into secure and insecure attachment. All of us have some insecure attachment elements, so it is very unlikely that anyone is 100% securely attached, and it is also not something that is with you for life. So earlier studies and the main narrative in science for a very long time was once the attachment style is set in your childhood, there's nothing you can do. It's going to change, not at all, and it'll stay the same throughout your life. We now know that that is not true. This is very similar to our ideas about our personality just being completely stable over life. This is something that is still dominating a lot of the scientific discourse, and there's also ample evidence that we can actually shape who we are, even though we are already adults. So, whatever you find, there's always something you can do about that. If we are mainly securely attached to our caregivers, that means that caregiver was probably very responsive, very available, and very attuned to our needs. If we have experienced insecure attachment, that can be on one end of the scale very obvious. So if there was neglect, if there was any abuse, physical, verbal, those sort of things is quite an obvious indicator of insecure attachment later down the line. But it can also be an unresponsive caregiver. So if there is a parent, for instance, that might have depression, that will often result in the facial features not being very responsive. And I don't know if you've ever seen a baby, if you've ever been out and about and there's just a baby that you have no previous connection to, so not your own, not one of your friends or family, but that baby will seek connection wherever it goes, and it'll try to lock eyes with you. And there's often this strong desire to connect, and you know what it's like to connect with a baby, and you can kind of like make faces, and then you have this like cute interaction going on, which is really nice. But if one of your caregivers may have had depression, for instance, there's such a thing called stone face, where the responses are just not so strong. They're not so elicited on the face. And even that can result in insecure attachment. So this person may have been an excellent mother or father or guardian, and yet it may not have signaled to the child as it was growing up that I am here for you, I see you. Also, parents that are loving, wonderful parents, but are, for one reason or another, not perfectly capable of attuning to the child. So they might think this is what my child needs, and they're very good at trying to work out what the child needs and like giving it everything at once, but it might just not quite fit. So they might give the child what they would think they would want in that situation, but it might not actually work for this particular baby or this particular toddler. So it's not always a case of atrocious circumstances where it's blatantly obvious why the attachment would be insecure. It can also be, a healthy, happy family, couple of siblings, everything seems to be really like going well. There's nothing traumatic that happened, and yet we can still end up with an insecure attachment style. Within those, we can then look into avoidant. So this is where we deem it's not safe to connect to somebody else because this person could abandon me, but this person could also really overrule my boundaries. So often when we had a caregiver that was maybe overly involved, when you have helicopter parenting, if you have someone who is really trying to control you as you're growing up and really knowing what's best for you and pushing for that to be the thing that you do and the way that you think and like really up in your business up close, often as a result, you might develop an avoidant attachment style, which means you're actually seeking a certain distance from other people. You might also have a bit of a cynical view of others as inherently untrustworthy, and everyone's just out for their own good, and you shouldn't like just naively trust. You're making fun of people that are super gullible, and you're kind of seeing the ulterior motives in other people when they're actually coming close to you. And then opposite that is the anxious. It's sometimes also called ambivalent type, where there is a desire for closeness, but it's mixed with this super high fear of being rejected. And that is a bit of a, it takes a lot of energy, that type, because on the one hand, we want to get like really, really, really close, but then we're also like, oh my God, no, but what if you're gonna, reject me and like not want to be close to me anymore? So there's a lot of energy, and it often results in what we refer to as someone being clingy, which is a bit of a derogatory term. So someone who's just like really eager to be close all the time and to get ever closer. So no matter how close you get, you want to get even closer. You want to be in the head of the other person. You want to know their every move. You want to feel like almost like they are a part of you and you are a part of them, so that you are inseparable, that you're one entity. That is the dream of someone who scores very highly on the anxious attachment scale. And as I said, you can categorize as in like secure, avoidant, anxious, but you are a mix of all of them. So there's a different proportion of these that actually match you, but we have elements of all of that inside of us. There has also been a fourth time that has been put forward a little bit later. That's called either disorganized, and sometimes it's called fearful. That is a bit of a mix of the avoidant and of the anxious type. So this is people who desire intimacy, but they have a general distrust for others. So this makes it a little bit hard, because on the one hand, they want to get close real fast, real soon, and like very, very close, but they also don't trust that others are capable of doing it. So they're avoiding involvement with a relationship that might actually lead to rejection. They hold negative views, not just of other people, but also of themselves. And this is a little bit the bringing it together from both of the other types, because when you're avoidantly attached, you tend to hold positive views of yourself, but negative views of others. And if you're predominantly anxiously attached, it's the opposite way around. So they tend to hold positive views of others because you want to get close to those others, but negative views of yourself because you think you're actually not good enough, and sooner or later they'll discover it and then you'll be alone, right? So if you have both of these quite strongly, you can make that into a fourth type called disorganized. And we can also appreciate that we might just be scoring high on both of those, and that's essentially the same. So whenever we talk about types in psychology, whenever you do any of those quizzes, like which unicorn am I, most of these say absolutely nothing, but even the well-validated ones that we do have, take them with a grain of salt. We're not that simple. You're not such a simple creature that I can split you into one of 3 or 4 types, and that the whole world is just made of 4 types of people. I think if you just look at your 4 closest people in your life, are they all a different type? Is that the only type of person out there? No, I think we know that deep down, right? So what do we make of this? So normally we think about these in terms of romantic relationships, and that is a good point to start because in our romantic relationships, somehow as a society, as a culture in the West, we have given that relationship such a prominent value and such high status that it's the only space where we have permission to act a little unhinged. What do I mean by that? If at work, one of your colleagues is bringing in snacks, and there are snacks for everybody on the team, but for some reason, there's one snack too little, and you are missing out on this one snack, right? It would be a little strange if you threw yourself on the ground and like screamed because you felt excluded. That would be something that we would frown upon, and we would think, this person doesn't have it all together, do they? Right? Similarly, with friendships, if a friend is meant to call you back and for some reason they don't, it would again seem a little bit unhinged if that made you go on this rampage where you're talking to all the other friends and you're like, can you believe it? So and so didn't call. It's been 72 hours. That again would seem a little bit dramatic. However, when we're doing this in the romantic realm, all of a sudden that is a lot more okay. So our threshold for behavior that is a little bit more childlike, that is a more emotionally driven, less rational, less reasonable, somehow is okay in the romantic realm because we'll call it romantic. So if someone is doing something slightly crazy, but both people like each other, then we're like, oh, what a romantic gesture. If the same thing happens, but the people don't both feel the same way, all of a sudden it's creepy, it's stalkerish, it's strange, it's over the top, it's crazy, right? But there's a certain permission, there's a certain allowance within romantic relationships where we get to feel our feelings in a more intense way, and we get to behave in a bit more of an unhinged way. So there's positives there. And it's also where we feel our fear of rejection, the negative views that we hold of others. If you're constantly suspicious that your partner's going to leave you because you just know that they might, or that they might cheat on you all the time, where it's more permissible to do that. So this is why most of the research is only looking at romantic relationships. However, the way that we're attaching to ourselves and to friends and to colleagues and to how our work and our career, our identity, to life itself can all be connected to our attachment style. And we can improve one area and see ripple effects in the other area. So when I do my coaching with the high achievers, when I talk about creating success synergy, this is one of the elements that I'm talking about, because it means that I can actually improve the way that I am connecting in one area of life, and that will have beautiful ripple effects everywhere else. With friendships, we see exactly the same. Some people want to have one best friend and they want to be really close to that one best friend, and they expect a high level of loyalty. They want this friend to be available at all times. They want that friend to know everything about them, to memorize all the important facts, and to almost know without saying what they want, like that the other person is anticipating their every need, right? And if two people come together that have that very same expectation, beautiful. That could be a wonderful, very, very close friendship. But there's other people that think, I like my friends, but I don't want to like share everything about myself. Maybe there's some aspects of my life that I'd rather keep to myself. There's some people that don't like to talk about work outside of work. There's some people that don't want to talk about their romantic life when it's not with their partner, or perhaps with a therapist, if that is something that is interesting to that person. So there might be certain areas of life that we close off from all of our friends or from some of our friends. And if you are friends with someone who has a different idea of what it means to be friends, you can run into the very same problems that you have in romantic relationships. For instance, if you are somebody who is anxiously attached, you tend to gravitate towards friends that are a little bit more avoidant. This is the same thing that happens in our romantic relationships. A lot of people that are avoidant tend to click with those that are anxious, and that creates this crazy intimacy dance where you have the anxious person always trying to get closer, and then the avoidant person trying to increase that distance, and it's kind of like chasing you around. Up until the moment where the anxious person actually changes their behavior and they allow more space, and then often you find it flipped and the avoidant person is running after the one that they've been running away from first, right? Same thing happens in friendships. So we often like the friends that are embodying a side of us that we're not quite living ourselves. So for an anxiously attached person, it is super attractive to see somebody else who's like super easygoing in terms of just saying no to people left, right, and center. So if you are a people pleaser, if you're someone who knows every one of your friends' birthdays and even the friends' kids' birthdays, and you're sending little cards for all of these exciting moments in people's lives, and you're like very on it. And whenever they write to you, you're writing back immediately. Whenever they call you, you're like picking up, even if it's a really uncomfortable moment and you'd rather not talk on the phone, but you wouldn't dare not to pick up. If you're that kind of friend, likelihood is not so small that some of your friends will actually be quite different, and they'll be very matter of fact about cutting people loose if they're done with a friendship. They're just like, well, that didn't work anymore. They might have no issues being rude to a waiter if the order was messed up. They'll just be like, this is not what I wanted. I need something else. How are you going to make it up to me? And that can be super, super attractive to see. So we like people on the one hand that are like us, but we also really like people that are embodying an aspect of ourselves that we would like to make bigger. So if we're seeing someone being super confident, very good with their boundaries, very clear in how close people are allowed to get, and at peace with that, seemingly, that is super, super attractive. If you're someone who would love to have stronger boundaries and who would really want to feel confident enough to be like, not today, and not then be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right? So there's an initial attraction. Similarly, from the other side of that very same relationship, the person who tends to be more avoidantly attached and who doesn't feel so comfortable having people up close, in a friendship, it is often a little bit more easy to tolerate someone being anxiously attached to you because there's more than one friend. So it's not quite as dramatic as it is with a romantic partner. And the person that's avoidantly attached has a huge respect of feelings and actually is quite good at pressing them down, and also isn't therefore very open to showing affection. So like showing that you really care about someone is difficult because deep down you also are afraid of rejection, but you just took it up a notch and we were like, well, I'm going to reject you first because that means no one can reject me, right? Clever logic for a toddler, not so clever when you're grown up. But this is often what we're still operating from. So this avoidantly attached person might actually really relish the fact to have a friend in their life that is really expressive, and then it's just like, I'm so happy to see you and I missed you and I want to hang out. And part of the avoidant person is going to be like, okay, like this is a little much. And they might even jokingly like make fun of the other person and be like, hold your horses, like don't go crazy, I'm not in love with you or anything. But deep down, a part of them loves seeing somebody else who is actually, although they might not consider themselves super confident, who is very secure in showing how much love and care they're capable of feeling, and they're actually like openly expressing it and openly demonstrating a desire to get close, very clearly signaling, I want you, which to the avoidant person is freaky and scary, but also kind of attractive because it's nice to be wanted on the one hand, and it's also really nice to see somebody being okay wanting you while you are kind of rejecting them. That is healing. So in a way, in a friendship, avoidant and anxious combinations can be really healing because it's not the one relationship we have. We all have more than one friends in theory, at least. So that makes it a bit of a better base to work on that dynamic. Same is true with colleagues. Same is true with work as well. So some people keep their works at an arm's length and are just kind of like, I don't care about it. I don't care. I mean, I could lose my career tomorrow. I'll just do something else. It's all like interchangeable. If I don't do this job, I'll do another job. They're very matter of fact, maybe also very cutthroat, asking for a raise, leaving to go somewhere else, like not really caring, maybe even moving locations quite easily because their whole persona is that no one's attached to me. I'm not attached to anything. Like I am free. I can do whatever I want. Freedom is a big motivator if you are more leaning towards the avoidant. And similarly, on the anxious side, you might have people that are in one company for decades and they're really, really attached to the name on the door. They're really attached to their boss. They're trying to please everyone around them. They're really interested in having a team and having everyone be close, and actually also hang out after work and like go for drinks and like really, really make it feel like a community that is stable, that they can rely on. And last but not least, we have this relationship with ourselves too. And this is, I think, what most people don't really think about, because we're like, well, I can't run from myself, can I? You can. And I bet you do. Because what normally happens is, if we are anxiously attached, we might seek the reassurance and approval of other people, because we don't think we can do that to ourselves. We don't think we can be there for ourselves. So we're very externally focused. We like to look at the outside and seek what we need from there. And this is because we are internally insecure, as the attachment style suggests, and we don't think we can take care of ourselves. If you are avoidantly attached, you do think you can take care of yourself, but you're actually not really connecting to your needs. You don't really know what you're really feeling, what you're really yearning for, just because the mere sensation of yearning for something is uncomfortable, because you like control. You like to be fully in control. Emotions are something you're inherently not so sure are controllable. So you're just gonna, push them down, not really feel them, and create some distance. So in both cases, you're not securely attached to yourself. And this is where the solution to all of this lies. So as I said in the beginning, we used to think in the scientific community that attachment styles formed first couple of years of life, first 5, first 7, some say up to age 14. There's a debate about all of this. And then we used to think that that's it, it's set. We know now that that's not true. And there's a couple of things we can do to actually become more securely attached. One is in romantic relationships. So if you are either scoring high on the anxious or on the avoidant side, you can choose a partner who is securely attached if you find that attractive. Because this is the thing, if you are very in your anxious or in your avoidant attachment, the secure people will do nothing for you, because there's no thrill. You can change that though, and I'm going to come to that in a moment. But if you happen to somehow get yourself a securely attached partner, over time, their non-reactiveness to your crazy, whether this is like running away or like trying to get super close, is going to shift you towards more secure attachment. So this is a beautiful thing to do. And often in romantic relationships, we actually find our opposite more attractive until we work on our internal wiring and until we're actually changing the relationship that we have to ourselves. Another thing to do that has shown really prominent effects is psychotherapy. This can also be coaching if it is a very well-trained coach who has a background in psychology, who is ideally trauma-informed, who knows about attachment styles, and who is very actively monitoring, looking at the relationship between you as you're working together. So this means you have to also work on the meta level, not just on the thing that you're working on, but also always looking at, okay, so how do I and my coach, how do we relate to one another? That's crucial. So pick wisely. There's a huge range of people out there. Psychotherapists are trained in this, so then you know that they can do this. That is very beautiful, because there you can have an offer of a secure attachment figure for a while. Sometimes we call this process reparenting, where we can kind of catch up and make up for maybe something that was missing when we were growing up. What is beautiful there is also, and this is going to sound a little bit counterintuitive, that it is a service. It is somebody who you pay or who your insurance pays to listen to you. And that can be good for us, because I know this sounds a little strange, but because as soon as the motives of the other person are fairly evident, as soon as you know this is their job, they get paid to pay attention to me, a part of our nervous system relaxes, because we don't have to wonder what's in it for them. It is blatantly obvious what's in it for them. And that actually soothes our nervous system. And that actually makes us feel like we don't have to do a lot to make sure this person sticks around. And we also don't have to be very suspicious of this person's motives, because they are on the table. So this can be a huge factor and actually allowing us to get close to somebody, because we know we're paying them. So that gives us a sense of control of the situation and a sense of commitment, which is actually quite beautiful in that particular concept. I don't want to give you incomplete information. So something to add is that your attachment style can also change for the worse if you happen to experience negative life events, such as a divorce or even just a breakup. And this can even be true for a situationship. So even if you haven't been in a committed relationship, but even if you've just had an affair, you got someone to know, but it didn't even go anywhere physical, or you have had a physical relationship, but it was no strings attached, or it was a polyamorous situation. It doesn't have to be a profound decade-long like relationship or marriage. That can trigger a lot of our fears to come up if this ends, especially if we don't anticipate it. And that can sometimes mean that for a brief moment in time, we're pushed back into old patterns, which is totally fine. We can rise like the phoenix, but this is true, and I would not want to keep that from you. Also, really unpleasant things if you experience an accident, if you experience the death of a child, anything that is just really not part of the natural order, how we think life should be. Also, things like the pandemic was a really big factor that was shaking people up and changing attachment styles. And just because those things can happen to us at any point in time doesn't mean we're then thrown back to a point where we can't recover from. Now, if a romantic relationship to a secure person is not attractive right now, and maybe also not feasible or not available, and if also psychotherapy and a coach is maybe not something that's already part of your life, you can also work on this yourself. And this is, in a nutshell, also what happens when you have that secure relationship to a romantic partner, or you have a secure relationship with a psychotherapist or a coach who is trained in this kind of work, is that you're essentially rewiring the relationship to yourself, and that's what makes you show up differently in the world. So you can start this by yourself. First of all, by just becoming aware of how you are treating yourself. How are you acting when no one's watching, when you're just by yourself? Food is a great place. There's a lot of connotations. If you have disordered eating in any way, then maybe this might be too rich of an area to go into. But if you feel like your relationship to food and eating is generally kind of okay, then it is okay to look at that in depth. Like, do you make food for yourself? Do you look after yourself? Do you eat regularly? What kind of food do you pick? Do you put in effort? And how is that different to when there's other people? Because that often shows the difference. Self-care. So this is in terms of taking care of our body. And I want to be very explicit that just because someone is like showering multiple times a day and like really amping up the grooming routine, that does not necessarily mean that you feel securely attached to yourself, because it can also mean that you're just constantly fighting your body essentially, and thinking that there's like something inherently like gross about you and you need to like scrub it all the time, right? So there's not a clear way that it looks like, but you know what your feelings are in relationship to how you look after yourself. So on the one hand, we have this idea of not looking after ourselves when it comes to a hygienic grooming kind of place, and we're maybe just like not putting a lot of effort into how we dress, and we're maybe just kind of like making do and not really like trying. That could be an indication of an insecure attachment to yourself. But on the other hand, it might also be overly stylizing your appearance and being like very nitpicky and constantly picking your face and constantly perfecting another area and being like really hard on yourself in terms of everything having to be polished and perfect and like no smells that don't belong. That kind of thing can also signal a sense of not feeling like we're enough at this point in time. So those are some things you can look at that are with you every single day, that have nothing to do with other people and yet have everything to do with other people, because how you're treating yourselves in the moment where there's no one around gives you a ton of intel on how you're attached to yourself. Are you suppressing stuff? Are you making it not important and you're very nonchalant and I don't care and like nobody, like I don't mind? Or are you like so attached that it just becomes a little bit frantic? And then the next step from there is looking at it in friendships and just becoming aware. So awareness is really half the game. This is why I'm always talking about conscious connection, because we're connected all the time, whether we know it or not, but making it conscious and consciously watching how we connect, why we connect, how that makes us feel, what we want. That's how you change your life. And this is what you can do with your friends. If you're sending a message and that person doesn't message back, how do you feel, right? If people send you messages, do you sometimes feel overwhelmed? You're like, oh my God, there's so much on my WhatsApp. I don't know when to respond to this. What does that say about you, right? What do you feel like you need to bring in terms of like the level of response, the speed of response? Like, what are the expectations that you're having for the interactions you have with the people around you? If you are always the show pony at any social gathering and you're telling the stories and you're being super funny and you're coming in with all of va va boom and you're just, having a fancy accessory and you're showing it around and you're just like the life of the party, how does that make you feel? Are you exhausted? Do you love it? When do you love it? Are there certain people you want to be like that around all the time and others where that doesn't seem necessary? Likewise, if you prefer to have small gatherings, just one-on-one, you don't like the groups, you like to have a really low-key situation, you like to observe, you just like to be there and watch. Why is that? How does that make you feel? Are you at peace with these situations? This is something that if you take it seriously and if all you do is watch, is by itself changing things just because you're becoming aware. And then you don't even have to force change, right? So don't try, if you're always the quiet one, don't all of a sudden come in and like tell one joke after another. If that feels like it just makes you uncomfortable thinking about it. That's not really the spirit of things, because then coming back to the relationship to yourself, you're actually kind of overriding your own needs and how you're needing to feel to be comfortable. You're violating your own boundaries, or at least that's a possibility. So don't force anything, just watch and then just look in micro moments if you want to tweak things a little bit. If you're making yourself a very fast snack, it's not really good food, you haven't eaten for a long while, now you just need something. Can you just like arrange it a little bit more carefully so that it's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing and you feel like it is a teeny tiny bit more special than what it used to be? That's one way, right? Those little things. In conversations with friends, if you're constantly talking, and you feel exhausted and you feel like you can't show the vulnerable parts of yourself so much because you got to keep them entertained and be this polished, shiny version, can you just once in a while take a sip of water and just be like, huh, taking a break. It's only 30 seconds. How do I feel? That will change your life if you keep at it, if you keep doing it. And before you know it, you are actually this like secure beacon that other people come towards because they want a piece of that. So what I said in the beginning about in romantic relationships and in friendships, we are attracted to that, what we feel like we don't have. All of us like the really securely attached person because they can move and float between all of them, but the center is stable. The center is calm, the center is confident. And if we come across an individual where we feel like, all right, they're like a wild party animal right now, but I can tell inside they don't care what people think. That is a very different feeling to someone like dancing like crazy because they feel like their life depends on it, right? Similarly, if you have someone sitting in the corner that's kind of jittery and like sunken in and it's just like do you notice that they're like trying to force themselves to get into it, but they really don't want to? Super, super different experience to someone who's like calm in the corner, looking around, having a great time, just like looking at people. We feel that, we sense that different type of energy immediately. And if you can embody this calm confidence in either situation, people will notice and people will like draw to you like crazy. So I hope you found this interesting. This is a bit of a longer video, but I actually feel like I don't want to deprive you of the depth of some of the things that I discuss loads when I give lectures, that I discuss loads when I run workshops and when I run courses. And that I talk loads about with my clients, obviously, because this is the kind of stuff that we work on behind the scenes. But I don't really make that much time to talk about it in depth to you. And I hope you've enjoyed it, therefore. And let me know if you observe some tangible changes in how you connect.